You're right, you are. Now, our next speaker is Jim, who's always operating behind the scene. His wife Mary has ECT and he's going to say a few words. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Martin. And I would like to thank everybody who turned up here today to support what has been our 5th annual anti-electroshock protest here now in Cork. We started way back in 2006 and it's been on every year since. The important thing about these protests, I think, is the message that we get out. We talk to lots of people, we generate media interest, and we get a message out which is very important. And on that score, I would particularly like to thank our local paper here, the Irish Examiner, which has given us great coverage, and also the Cork Independent. And I believe there will be more coverage of this event in next week's paper as well. Very often, it's only the message of official psychiatry that is heard. And the voice of survivors has often been drowned out. Similarly, the voice of people who suffered sexual abuse in the church were never heard years ago. And it wasn't until organisations like 1 in 4 spoke out that eventually people began to sit up and listen, and people were made accountable, and people were brought to justice. So I think we have a lot to learn from organisations like 1 in 4, that we too can speak out and make people accountable. Kevin mentioned the figures for ECT. If you go back to 2004, the Mental Health Commission report for that year had 1 sentence on ECT. 1 sentence. I think that reflects their priorities. The latest figures were for 2009, and I'm glad to report that the Mental Health Commission is now beginning to make hospitals accountable, to get them to make quarterly reports on the incidence of ECT, and in doing that, to highlight what is still happening, and generally to be accountable for what up to now has been unaccountable. So I'd like to think that that is as a result of our campaign on the street. Not just ourselves here, but other people too have contributed. There is a Delete Section 59B campaign going on, and all together, along with the Critical Voices Network, to which we are affiliated, it is a good way of making people accountable. People who suffer from mental health problems are not second-class citizens. We consider electroshock, particularly forced electroshock, to be an abuse of human rights. And as we say, human rights are for everybody, at all times. Thank you very much.
I'd just like to say one more thing as well. That I think it is very difficult to actually consent to electroshock. I think if you really think about it, the fact that most people are drugged beforehand, to consent is pretty difficult. So I think that even to be making a distinction between forced and not forced, in my opinion, it's always forced, because if you really knew about it, I don't think you would choose it. And I'd also like to remember here this woman that I have here beside me. Her name is Elizabeth Ellis. She lives in Minnesota. She said no to electroshock, knowing that if she said it, she'd be put into hospital. And I think to do such a thing is an awful brave act, because I feel if I had to go back to hospital again, I would rather die. That's the way I feel about being in hospital and in psychiatric hospitals. And this woman said no to electroshock, and of course when she said no, she was told she had to have it, and she's had many, many sessions since. And imagine medical people saying that you have to have something that harms you, and it has harmed so many people. We've heard even along the streets here today how many people have been harmed by electroshock. and how people feel so powerless to even say to psychiatrists the things they don't want for their loved ones, or the people who are the unfortunate people to have to go to a psychiatrist in the first place. And some people said, you want to be out of your mind to go to a psychiatrist in the first place. So I'd like to say as well, on behalf of Mind Freedom Ireland, we're a small group, but I think we are doing a lot to keep this in the public eye. And I thank all the people that come out all the time, every time, and we work really well together. We have a group called Stand By Me in Douglas as well. It goes on every week, and there's always some people there. And any people who are feeling they want emotional support, we're there in Costas and Douglas as well. So thanks very much again.
Hopefully where it comes out now.
Good stuff. Take one.
Huh?
Take one.
Take a test, have a test to see if it's working.
Greg, would you sing now, yeah?
Oh yeah, you're very good.
Are we finished now, so is that it?
Thanks, yeah.